Kia ora koutou. Greetings to each of you. My name is Emily Macklow. This is my submission to the New Zealand Mental Health Inquiry, about which I am passionate. First of all, I'm really grateful that there is this inquiry and that these issues concerning the mental health of our people are being more widely and openly discussed. That's fantastic. I also want to express appreciation to all the counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, grief support workers, victim support volunteers, social workers, nurses, doctors, midwives, alternative health providers, teachers, educators, public defendants and advocates, emergency workers, and so many more. There are so many of you motivated by passion and genuine care, putting in uncountable hours to support others' well-being and safety. So I want to, first of all, thank you for all that you do. I'll start by telling you a bit about myself. Last year, my dearly loved husband of 21 years and the father of our 4 children took his life. He was given a formal diagnosis of bipolar and embarked on a course of psychiatric medicine, which was being monitored to get the levels just right. And he also had a caseworker assigned to him who visited with him for an hour each week. These measures were not sufficient support. The bulk of the responsibility of his care rested on my shoulders. And yet, because of his mental distress, I was already the sole provider of a family of 6. As well as having 4 children to care for, I was unable to adequately care for him and keep him safe on my own. He was tormented by suicidal urges, and we sought help wherever we could, but it just was not enough. Too many people are unable to access adequate mental health support because the services are completely undermanned, under-resourced, underfunded, and overrun. The need is greater than the capacity presently to meet that need. And this was our experience. We were left unsupported. And in the end, my husband completed suicide, and he is now gone forever. Our family have been left to pick up the pieces and try to continue on without him. The grief and anguish have been almost unbearable. Certainly, it's given me a passion to do what I can to ensure that others who are suffering in similar ways, whether by mental distress or addiction, or the families of the people that they are trying to support, that all these people could receive the care and support they desperately need. We're talking about saving lives here. I want to call on the inquiry into mental health and addiction to recommend that all people who are suffering any form of mental distress or addiction would have free access to a full menu of services so that no one who seeks help is turned away. I also want to recommend that everyone is offered support in many ways, not just medication. These are the main areas I see needing to be addressed here in New Zealand. Adequate funding needs to be allocated to ensure there are enough trained personnel to meet the needs of both supporting the mentally distressed person and the family. Adequate funding also needs to be put towards education and social inclusion programs to eradicate the ignorance, exclusion, and stigmas attached to mental illness. We need to target and measure the growth of well-being as much as we measure and target the growth of wealth. There needs to be a huge reduction in wait periods for face-to-face meetings with support people, and there needs to be more consultation with family members who know their own. We need to design a system that gives people and their whānau easy access to a range of comprehensive services that improve quality of life and health outcomes and supports these things: the promotion and self-management of well-being, stable, adequate housing, education and employment supports, income support, family and parenting support, psychiatric and other treatments, physical health care, community and home-based crisis support, talking therapies, other alternative therapies, advocacy and navigation, community connection, cultural and spiritual healing. We also need to be encouraged to think about mentally distressed people not as disordered or diseased, but as people who have the same humanness and rights as everyone else. Rather than thinking of these people as disorderly and needing to be fixed to meet society's needs, we need to see them as citizens with rights that need to be upheld. These are some of the basic human rights that each of us need: to live in social conditions that enable us to look after our own and one another's well-being, to know how to recognize and respond to stress, distress, and addiction, to be easily able to find services and supports for people with distress and addiction, to get timely, respectful, and helpful responses from them, to have access to a comprehensive range of community-based services and supports. Also to be supported by people who understand, who've walked in the same shoes as us, as well as professionals. And to receive support to reconnect with ourselves, our family, and valued roles in our communities. I also believe that we need to reduce and eventually phase out completely all the inpatient units and replace them with home and community-based services for people in high-need crisis situations. I can see that the current model of education and the employment industry creates social isolation that places youth and families under undue stress. I call for a radical shift in our society that will bring people together to share their struggles in a more community-based model, more like the ways we used to live in tribal villages and extended families before massive industrialization. We all need to know in a deep way that we're needed and loved and part of a community that appreciates and values our input, whatever it is. We all have our own special flavor of giftings, and what we each have to offer is different from what the next person has to offer. And when we put all of that together effectively, we're much stronger together than we are on our own. And I firmly believe that that is at the root of many of the mental distress and addictive behavior of many people in our society, because our society is fundamentally off in a foundational way. Too much stress is placed on the individual, and we're given too many responsibilities to carry and shoulder on our own. So I want to see many more community-based opportunities given to people, such as some that are working really well, community gardens, other community projects, and free workshops. There are many things working well now. We just need to implement them on a far wider scale. I believe we can do that. New Zealand is spectacular. Look, I have the beautiful Mount Maunganui behind me here, Mo'o. I just know that this unique land that we live in, because it's so far from the rest of the world and the population is small, I know that we can forge ahead and we can do things together down here that other countries are not doing yet. And I know there are other countries that we can look to, other lands, for instance, Iceland and some of the other Scandinavian countries who are also off in their faraway corner of the globe, in smaller populations, smaller area, able to be forerunners in implementing many new social ways. I call on New Zealand not only to follow their lead, but to go further and become a leader themselves. Everybody needs to have access to freely available support and counseling from both trained professionals and support workers, as well as peers who have themselves experienced mental distress or addiction, and their families, and support specific to their culture, including Maori and Pacifica. I've also seen, because I'm a music teacher here in Tauranga, I've seen the value of community music and arts in bringing people together and enhancing spiritual well-being. So I also want to call for more funding and support of these areas, both in the education system and within the community. Thank you so much for taking the time to consider my submission. There's of course so much more that I could say, but these are the main points I want to raise at this time. I really appreciate the opportunity to have my say. And I especially want to speak up for those who, like my husband, and far, far too many others, can no longer speak for themselves. Kia ora.